Hi, and welcome to our 5th of 6 sessions. Today's topic will be, no, I'm not going to do it all again. Welcome everyone who's catching the recording. We're going to begin by looking at the Torah, because the Torah addresses interfaith marriage in ways that you are naturally going to expect and in ways which might surprise you. So, today's lesson is going to focus on texts of Torah and the modern condition and basically ignore the 3,000 years between the culmination of the Torah and now. The reason why is because those almost 3,000 years are really boring on this issue. Not a whole lot of intriguing things. So we're going to stick with the Torah, which is much more interesting, and today, which is much more interesting. And the in-between time, there wasn't a lot of interfaith marriage among the Jewish people. So let's go back to the Torah. But before we begin, we are going to, whoops, I hit the wrong button again. I want to do screen share, and yes. All right, good. Janet, can you see it say interfaith marriage in the Torah and today? Is that what it's looking like? Okay,
yes,
good.
I see it.
All right, good. I just want to make sure everything is working appropriately. So, friends, we are about to study words of Torah, so let's say the blessing together in Hebrew and in English. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, V'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with the commandments and commands us to engage in words of Torah. So friends, as I've revealed to you in past sessions that I am a devious teacher, in that I promise one thing, but subversively deliver something different. I still give you what I'm promising you, but subversively, I'm giving you something else as well. So what I'm promising today is discussion on interfaith marriage. Subversively, what I want to give you is an intriguing way that Torah's law and stories come into conflict with each other. It's one of the fascinating, paradoxical ironies of our Torah that make it so rich, is that you'll have a mitzvah, an absolute commandment on one issue, and then the stories of the Torah will completely undermine the laws of that commandment. So, an example that you'd be familiar with, famously, the Torah says that the firstborn child gets the lion's share of the inheritance. Okay, that is mitzvah. It is commandment. You can't waver from it. Even if that is not your favorite child, and you much prefer a child from a different marriage, a different woman, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Your firstborn child has to get the lion's share of the blessing and the inheritance, and then pretty much every story in Genesis undermines it. The second child, or in Joseph's case, the 10th, 11th child, comes into supremacy over the oldest child time and time again. It's just one of the fascinating little features of the Torah, and we're going to see that again today. So obviously what we're focusing on is interfaith marriage, but one of the things I wanted to show you, just like I've been sneaking in teaching Talmud to you, or sneaking in letting you learn about and become familiar with some of the important rabbis of our tradition. Today's sidebar is seeing how there's this struggle between the law of the Torah and the narrative, the stories of the Torah that undermine the law. So with that said, let's go to the Torah. And we are going to start with two narratives that don't undermine the Torah. We're going to start with the law. We're going to start with two narratives early on in our Torah tradition from the book of Genesis with our patriarchs. It's a story of Abraham and a story of Isaac. And in each of these passages, they take special care to choose the right bride for their sons. So I would like to go ahead and let's see if I can't do this. I'm looking for, why don't I look for maybe 3 readers to start with. Please raise your hand if you would like to be a reader. Let's see, I can see Rini. I can't see everyone at once. So far, I see Rini. I can use a 2nd or 3rd reader. Anybody who wants? Cindy, Rini, and Cindy, and Barbie. So that's good for now. Rini, if you could, Rini, Cindy, Barbie. Rini, can you please read the first text, Genesis 24, when Abraham was old? And you have to unmute yourself first, of course.
I thought I did.
You did. You're great.
Okay. Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to the senior servant of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, "Put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to the land of my birth and get a wife for my son Isaac."
So a quick word on this text. We'll read the next one as well, and then we'll start to have some discussion. So for those maybe not familiar with the setting of the story, Abraham and Sarah lived in Mesopotamia in present-day Iraq. And when they, at old age, received a calling to go to the land that God will show them, which becomes the land of Canaan. And there Abraham and Isaac settle, and miraculously in old age, they conceive and have a son named Isaac. And now Sarah has died, Isaac is getting old, and Isaac is still not married. And Abraham's worried that if Abraham dies, that Isaac will just marry one of these Canaanite women, and that will not do. And so his trusted servant, he sends him on a journey back to the homeland, back to Mesopotamia, so that he can find for him a bride among his kin. And anyone who can name it, be the first to mute yourself and call out, who does that servant find by the well, offers to bring water for the flocks? Who is it?
Rebecca?
Rebecca is the answer. And Barbie, stay unmuted so that you can read the next passage. So Abraham, in the first one, makes sure that someone of the kin, someone from his greater clan of household, will be the the bride for his son Isaac. And now Isaac is the parent here, and Jacob is about to run off because he just stole the birthright and the blessing from his brother Esau, the older brother, and he's about to run out of the house before Esau kills him. And Isaac gives Jacob special instructions before he leaves the house. Barbie, read Genesis 28.
So Isaac sent for Jacob and blessed him. He instructed him, saying, "You shall not take a wife from among the Canaanite women. Up go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take a wife there from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother."
Nice. So in fact, Isaac does the same, sends Jacob back to that very same place, actually, and there he's going to find Rebecca, his mother's brother, Laban, and he will fall in love with one of Laban or Laban's children, one of his daughters, and not only marry her, but inadvertently marry her sister as well. I think I gave it away, Leah and Rachel. So that's, you have here 2 instances right off the bat where the very beginning of our, our patriarchs, both Abraham and Isaac, take special care to make sure that their sons only marry within the clan and don't marry one of the Canaanite women. And so we're going to have our first discussion in our discussion group right off the bat. Before we talk about everything there is to talk about with interfaith marriage and so forth, I don't want us to go there because we're going to have a series of discussions. This is the first topic, and I ask you please to confine the first discussion to this topic. And the question are these: who in your family has expressed the view that Jews should marry other Jews? Who is it? Was it your father? Was it you? Who in your family has made the case that Jews should marry other Jews? And the question then is, thinking of that person or people, what were their motives? What do you think compelled them to feel that way and express that opinion? And then the third question is, what were their arguments? What did they say in trying to convince, or maybe they took a stand and said, if you don't, then, blank. What were their arguments, what their spoken words about why people should not intermarry? So I'm going to stop the share now. I'm going to go ahead and break us into breakout groups. And let's do, we'll do 6 groups today. In a moment, all right, I've opened up the room, so it's going to ask you to go ahead and join, and go ahead and click join, and you will be in your breakout group. Who says don't intermarry? Why? And what did they say about it? Hello, Linda Zelizer. You got to hit join to go into one of the breakout groups. Jean Gary, are you there? Can you hear me, Jean? Hi, Jean. You want to hit unmute for a sec? You're still muted, so I can't hear you. Oh, there you are. Do you want to go into one of the breakout groups so you can discuss, talk with people?
Yes.
All right, so does it say join a breakout group on your screen?
No.
All right, so I'm gonna, it doesn't say join a breakout group. All right, let me see if I can move you. Oh, it does, you found it? Go ahead and hit join. You did it. Good job, girl. All righty. Hi, Pam. Hi, Nancy Shapiro. I didn't see you earlier. Hi, Judy Fine. I didn't make it to your groups, but I only got to the 3 of the 6 groups, but I'll get to the other ones on the next session. It looks like a few of the groups are still finishing their talks. Hey, there's Lynn and Michael Friedman. Hey guys, welcome to the talk. Oh, you're muted, Lynn.
We were in the break room during the discussion.
Yeah, I just didn't make it to yours. I only got to 3 of the 6, but I'll go to the other 3 next time. All right, I think we've got just about everyone back. So I hope you had a good discussion and heard about people in your family who felt like Abraham and Isaac did, that your Jews should marry other Jews. And I hope not only that you're able to name some members of that family, but also try to understand them, where they were coming from, why they felt that way, and what were some of the things that they said and articulated to, express that. So now we're going to get back to our text. In fact, why don't we just jump to it right now? We're going to look at now at 2 very famous interfaith marriages in the Torah. We're going to start right away in the book of Genesis. At the end of Genesis, almost the entire second half of the book of Genesis tells one story, and that's the story of Joseph. It's important in many ways, including the fact that it brings the Jewish people, or the Israelite people, or the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Jacob, into Egypt. So it sets up the dramatic story of the Exodus that would dominate the next 4 books of the Torah. So the Joseph story is important and lengthy, and one I'm going to just assume everyone's familiar with. As you know, Joseph not only interprets Pharaoh's dreams, but also tells him what to do about it. And Pharaoh is so impressed not only with Joseph's ability to anticipate the future, but also his plan, that he understood what to do and how to capitalize on the understanding of what was coming in the future, the years of plenty and then the years of famine. And so Pharaoh empowers Joseph, this slave, not only slave, but a slave who was then sent to prison by a false accusation. And Pharaoh props up Joseph in really visible, demonstrative ways. He wants to show the people that Joseph is now in power, that Joseph is his right-hand man, that Joseph needs to be respected and listened to. So what this passage we're about to read from chapter 41 is showing us how Pharaoh makes Joseph an important man, visibly. So Cindy, I think you are our 3rd reader, and I'm going to invite you to please unmute yourself. Let me make it a little bigger and help you out here. Maybe I can make it 1 bigger. There we go. Phyllis, Cindy, will you please read chapter 41's excerpt?
Pharaoh further said to Joseph, "See, I put you in charge of all the land of Egypt." And removing his signet ring from his hand, Pharaoh put it on Joseph's hand. And he had him dressed in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. He had him ride in the chariot of a second in command, and they cried before him, "A Breck." Thus he placed him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, yet without you no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh then gave Joseph the name Zaphanath-Paneah.
You're doing great with these Hebrew words, and some Egyptian words. Abrek, we don't even know what that means. It's some Egyptian word that just means like huzzah or something. Like it's not even translated because we don't know what it means. So good job.
Thank you.
Now we're getting to the important part.
And he gave him for a wife Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. Thus Joseph emerged in charge of the land of Egypt.
All right. So Joseph, Pharaoh gives Joseph all the trappings of basically the privileged class of Egypt, courtiers, exalted ones, officials. And so he gives him the second best chariot in Egypt to ride around in, so that everyone knows. And he gives him, the clothes. In fact, Joseph becomes so assimilated, dressed like an Egyptian, wearing the makeup of an Egyptian, speaking the tongue of the Egyptians. He becomes so assimilated that when his own brothers see him later on, they don't even recognize him as Joseph. That's how assimilated he is. Joseph must be assimilated for the story to function. But one component of it is that he can't have a proper man who doesn't have the proper wife, the wife of privilege and status. So he marries Joseph into one of the other ruling families, none other than the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On. So not only does Joseph marry someone not of his clan, but she is even the daughter of a foreign priest. I realized earlier when I was reading the text, I'm going to stop the share for a moment. If anyone has any questions, comments, remarks about these texts, go ahead and unmute and say it now, or raise your hand. But you don't have to wait for me to call on you. Just go ahead, Jay, and make your remark.
Just because I forget who sent his son not to marry a Canaanite.
Both Abraham and Isaac asked that of their sons.
Just because he sent his son not to marry a Canaanite, are we therefore to assume that that goes for everybody? And that
no, but everyone? The book of Numbers will make that explicit, and we're going to get there 2 texts from now.
Okay. And my question is about Joseph. It sounds like he was married, not that he had a choice. So couldn't he at some later date say, I was forced into this and I just did it for political reasons and I denounced this woman. This is a null and void marriage.
Absolutely. And as my wife reminded me this morning, because she loves, the Midrash as I love the Midrash, is that the rabbis basically tell the story in such a way that fulfills what Jay is saying. Basically, that they say that this woman, this daughter of Potiphera, was actually adopted, and she was actually Dinah. She was the child of Dinah. I can't remember exactly the Midrash, but inadvertently Pharaoh had fixed up Joseph with someone from his own clan who had left the clan and sort of been taken in with the Egyptians, and just like Moses was later, so that he actually did not intermarry according to one strain of the Midrash. And because, he's our hero, he's Joseph. What's he doing marrying a non-Jew when we're about to see later on that the book of Numbers will explicitly and expressly forbid it. And they say, well, he didn't actually. But the truth is, he did. Of course he did. He just saw it. He married someone. And Joseph is interesting. Joseph seems to enjoy very much the trappings of his Egyptian privilege. He wears it well. He digs it. He never expresses any dismay about it, other than once in his life. Only once does he want something, does he reveal that he is not completely assimilated into Egyptian life. And it is right before he's about to die. He brings his children close to him and makes them make a promise to him, a deathbed pledge. Who knows what that promise is? What does he demand of his children before he dies? Anyone? Go ahead and unmute.
Probably that they have to marry a Jew.
No, that he'll be
Interestingly,
buried in
no.
Jerusalem.
Say it, Judy.
He'll be buried in Israel.
That he be buried in Israel. And not right away, because when he dies, it becomes basically a state funeral. And, you know, he probably gets the entombment or whatever it was and all the rituals of an Egyptian burial. But he makes his children promise. He says, someday, hundreds of years from now, we're going to go back to our land. And when we do, dig up my bones.
Bones, take my bones
and
back.
take them with you.
Take them with you.
What Joseph may or may not have anticipated was 430 years of slavery.
Yeah.
But in the culmination, some 500 years after Joseph, the people will in fact go out of Egypt, and they will cross the wilderness of Sinai, and they will enter the promised land. What did they carry with them into the promised land? The Ark of the Covenant. They carry with them the tablets of the Ten Commandments, the broken tablets of the original Ten Commandments, and the bones of Joseph that are the first thing they do after the Battle of Jericho. I think it's right after the Battle of Jericho, once they get established in the land, is they bury Joseph's bones, fulfilling a promise made 500 years earlier. So Joseph was super assimilated, but he never forgot that he was a Jew and wanted to be buried in the Jewish cemetery. By the way, we have plots for sale in our cemetery, and you don't have to be all that dramatic and say, you know, wait 500 years. You can just buy a plot. It's no big deal. Any other comments or questions about the text that we've read so far?
Rabbi?
Yes.
Hi, it's Joanne. Probably know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. Was any effort made to have their daughters marry Jews also? Or was it only important for the guys?
Okay, so I mentioned Dinah. Jacob's daughter Dinah was raped by a Canaanite from a prominent family in a town where they were living, and the sons were divided over what to do about it. And some of the sons said, we got to kill him. And Jacob was like, well, you know, he wants to marry her. And the head clan of the head Canaanite clan, the great power over the town where they were living, offers, you know, to make a marriage and right the wrong of the rape. And Jacob really wrestles with what to do about this because it was not a marriage he sought out, but it is a marriage he agrees to, provided that not only that this young man be circumcised, but that his whole household, that the whole clan.
Which is a great story in itself.
What's that?
That's a great story in itself, what happened.
Yes, that they all need to be circumcised. So Jacob approves of a marriage of his daughter to someone outside of the clan, but he's forced into the circumstances and he demands the circumcision of that whole clan, not just the man that he's, you know, who had raped his daughter. The whole thing turns for naught because two of the brothers in anger end up killing not only the rapist, but also his whole clan.
Wasn't that part of the red tent?
Sure, the red tent will cover part that will be that episode is in a prominent importance in the book, The Red Tent.
I've never read it.
But it's right there in the book of Genesis. So there is, I think, an example of a daughter marrying outside. I'm trying to think of others.
Oh,
What about Queen Esther?
And that's an excellent point. Queen Esther very famously marries outside of our people with the encouragement of the paradigm of righteousness, Mordecai. Mordecai is, one of the great Jews without blemish. And he encourages this marriage. That is an excellent point. I'm trying to think if there's any other women. I mean, we're going to see a few famous men. I was focusing on the Torah, but in the Bible, I was just going to quickly skip over. There's famous intermarriages, primarily Solomon, who married lots of non-Israelite women. And of course, the most famous interfaith marriage gone awry was that of Samson. Do you remember who he married?
Delilah.
Yeah, that didn't go very well. She stayed loyal. He married a woman of the enemy, the Philistines. And turns out love did not conquer all. She stayed loyal to her people.
What
He
about
stayed
Ruth?
loyal to his people. And that does not make for a peace in the marriage canopy.
What about the story of wherever thou goest, I shall goest? Was that Ruth?
An excellent point. So Ruth is not Jewish and marries a Jewish man, and after his death decides to join with the people. But that's not exactly the case that we're looking for. In fact, it's the inversion of the case. It's a non-Jewish female who had married a Jewish man, but after he dies, stays loyal to the Jews, or really the Israelites, we should call them then in the time of the Bible. She's loyal to the Israelites, but most especially to her mother-in-law, Naomi, even more than she's loyal to the people. She's loyal to a person in Naomi. All right, let's go back to our text. So I wanted to show you the first very famous intermarriage, and that is Joseph. But Joseph is, kind of an exceptional character. Because he was so famously assimilated and lived apart from his people so famously, not by his own doing. He got sold to slavery in Egypt. But let's skip now to someone who is not apart from his people. The next big marriage in the Torah is also an intermarriage. Exodus chapter 2. Rini, I think it's your turn. Rini, do you want to take and read about our man Moses?
Am I on?
Yep.
Okay. When Pharaoh learned of the matter, could you make it a little bit smaller? I'm losing some of the lettering on the right. Okay. When Pharaoh learned of the matter, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh. He arrived in the land of Midian and sat down beside a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water and fill the troughs with water their father's flock, but shepherds came and drove them off. Moses rose to their defense and he watered their flock. And when they returned to their father Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come back so soon today?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." He said to his daughters, "Where is he then? Why did you leave the man? Ask him in to break bread." Moses consented to stay with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah as wife. She bore a son whom she named Gershom, for, he said, "I have been a stranger in a foreign land."
Thank you, Rini. I'm going to take us off screen share for a moment. So I don't know if any of you were aware, but the greatest prophet, the greatest #1 leader of our people throughout history, is famously intermarried. And I want to comment a little bit about this, because not only does Moses intermarry, but the Torah's narrator, the writer of the Torah, endorses it through a very clever device. So let's go back a moment. The Joseph story. Jay said, what if quietly Joseph was saying, well, this was forced upon me. It's interesting to note that not only at no point does Joseph express any problem with, being married to someone not of his clan. What's equally important is neither is the narrator and neither does the listener in the narrator's expectation. So let me explain what I mean by that. Sometimes the narrator in the Torah will make comments, and such did this, in defiance of the word of the Lord. So you see the narrator is scolding the character that they're describing. And so they're guiding the listener to be, to be opposed to what you're hearing about. That does not happen in the story of Joseph. It doesn't say, and he married, someone, even though that was wrong in the sight of the Lord. No, none of that. Not only that, sometimes in a story, the narrator will anticipate that the listener will have a problem with something, and the narrator will just sort of toss in a word of explanation. Oh, because such and such was the way things were done then. But that also doesn't happen in the story of Joseph. The narrator doesn't think that the listener is going to have any problem with the fact that Joseph is marrying the daughter of the priest of On. They just say it and describe it just like they're describing the carriage and they're describing the fancy clothes. It's just part and parcel of fanciness. And it's no tensions drawn to it. The narrator doesn't expect that the listener or the reader of this biblical tale is going to have a problem with Joseph's intermarriage. Yeah, yes, Cindy.
The question I have is, I never learned any of this in Hebrew school or Sunday school. And I'm wondering why they didn't tell about the intermarriage then, because I'm like shocked that Ruth was intermarried. I'm shocked that Moses was intermarried. I've never, in all my years, why don't they teach this in Sunday school?
Lest you marry a Gentile.
That's right.
My gosh, of course they're not going to tell you that.
Is that why they didn't teach it?
That's why I wouldn't. If I were them in that moment, I can't tell you that what was going on in their hearts, but if I were worried you were going to be in, marry someone not Jewish, the last thing I would want to tell you is that Moses did and turned out just fine. But lo and behold, let me finish my previous point and then we'll get to Adrian. Lo and behold, look at the story of Moses. Not only does Moses marry a non-Jew, but 2, the narrator has no problem with it. And 3, cleverly, surreptitiously, the narrator blesses it and says it's God ordained. How do we know? Because how does Moses meet her? Where are they? At the well. He comes upon her at the well and they have an encounter at the well. Well, how do we know that a marriage is blessed by God? Well, Abraham sends his servant to find a bride, and he gets to the well, and there is Rebecca willing to water his camels. That's how we know she's the one. And then later Jacob will go on his journey, and he'll get to the well, and he'll fall in love with this girl there, and lo and behold, it's his cousin Rachel. The well is the sign of fate and God's blessing to find your loved one.
Yeah.
And so for the narrator to write this story, the writer of the Torah to write this story that Moses finds his beloved at a well is to say, it's like Isaac and
Faith.
Rebekah, it's like Jacob and Rachel. This is a God-blessed union. And who's it between? Our hero Moses. And not only is she a Gentile woman, but just like Joseph did, she's the daughter of a foreign priest. Adrian had your hand up, and then Brenda.
So what about the Cushite woman?
Oh, you hold on to that. Adrian, you've done this now 3 times.
What's that?
Anticipated what's going to be the next text. So cut it out. Why are you in my head? And stop it. Get out of there. But we'll get to you. Adrian, we're just going to time out on that. We're going to get to the Cushite woman later.
But are the Canaanites the same as a Cushite?
I said time out. We're going to get to that. Brenda.
It's like Beshet. It's like meant to be. It's fate. It's Beshet. She was there waiting for him at the well. It's like sent by God. You see, it's like meant to be.
Bingo, Brenda. Thank you. You just gave the Yiddish word for exactly what the well represents. The well represents Beshet, that it's meant to be, because they use the tropes. Look, some of you studied literature. Maybe some of you were an English major. Some of you have read novels and books, and you understand that, things don't happen accidentally in great literature. There's deep meaning to the symbols, and to place them at the well is just what Brenda said. I'm pointing like this because on my screen, Brenda's right there. She might not be there on your screen, but Brenda, you see Brenda right there. Brenda said it's Besher. It's the way the Torah's author is telling you that this marriage is Besher. Even though it's an intermarriage, so what we're going to see, the only way we can come to understand this is that the Torah, which is written over a long period of time by many different people, some of those people were really okay with interfaith marriage, and some of them were not. And you get vestiges of it, maybe from different times they're okay, and other times they were not, or maybe at the same time, which is why they're making these polemical statements, while some authors are making a point of showing you why Abraham and Isaac are saying you've got to marry within your clan, and also, but someone else is saying Moses married out and it was just fine. But it isn't all just fine, because it's going to lead to controversy in Moses's own life. And then we're going to have a showdown, and we're going to take this case of interfaith marriage to the highest authority, God, and see how God rules on the issue of Moses's interfaith marriage. So let's get back to our...
Can I ask a question, Rabbi?
Yeah, ask your question, and then I think we're going to do a little more discussing. So I can't see who it is. Who's asking the question?
Susan Flossberg.
Oh, hi,
Howdy.
Susan.
Hey. So in my Torah study back home, a rabbi was trying to tell us that she didn't think Moses was a real person, but rather maybe a combination of a few different people. Do you have a take on that?
I'm sorry, can you just say that one again? I blew it and was looking to set up the next thing, and I missed the middle of what you said. Sorry, Susan.
No, it's okay. I'm used to it. I'm kidding. So our rabbi back home had suggested that Moses was not a real person, that he was more of a conglomerate of a few different people.
Hitting the button.
So I'd rather not go there with this one, because that's like the Pandora's box. What you're opened up there is a real prickly one, which is this true? Who wrote the Bible? Is Moses real, or is he a fictional character, or is he a mixture of both? Were there many Moseses? Those are all fascinating questions, but I feel like that subject is almost too big that it deserves its own hour and 20-minute discussion on what's true of the Torah studies. So I'm sorry, Susan, I'm going to defer only because it's too big.
Don't be sorry. That's fine. Sorry, folks.
That was too, it'd be like saying, yes, yes, but also what's the meaning of life? It's like, whoa, no, we can't go there just yet. And why do bad things happen to good people? No, you can't just throw that out. It's one of those grand, big ones that deserves its own hour. So I'm sorry, I'm going to defer it. I did want us to have a discussion here. In fact, maybe we'll quickly go with our groups, but not for as long this time. What I want is the yang to the yin, or the yin to the yang. Last time I asked you to talk about who was against interfaith marriage and why. What I want to do the flip side here. One is, were you surprised that the Bible, that some of these Bible heroes who had married non-Jews? Two, the next question, who do you know that has married someone of another religion? And can people be happy marrying someone of a different religion? And then what are the drawbacks of, interfaith marriage? So we're going to go, we'll stop our share. You can look at the, we're going to go back to our same groups, but a little bit shorter time right now. Please go ahead and hit join. And we're talking about who do you know who's intermarried, and can you be happy? And what are the struggles of interfaith marriage? Go ahead and hit join, Alvin and Linda and Barbara. Hey, Barbara, go ahead and hit join to join your group.
What happened? I can't hear you.
Do you remember what room you were in last time? I can put you back in it.
I was in 6.
I'll put you in it.
Thank you. All of a sudden I couldn't hear you and then it went dead. Thanks.
All right, you should be in it now. Hi, guys. Everybody's muted. You can unmute if you want to say hi. Hi, Mona.
Hi.
So I want to tell you guys a little funny something while we're waiting for everyone to leave their breakout groups. So we have a member in our congregation who's been, attending every one of these sessions, who is hard of hearing, and she reads lips. And she pointed out the fact, that I make it especially challenging because I keep going like this while I talk. And I never realized it before, but you know, we recorded, so I went to look at one of my recordings and I look like Stevie Wonder. I'm like, you know, isn't she lovely? Na, na, na. So I want you to know, I've been very conscientiously trying to be still. And, oh, good. Have I been doing good enough? Is it better? I hope so. So I'm trying not to move. It's like telling someone who talks with their hands to not talk with their hands. Like I'm trying. I'm like, you know, trying not to move. And once in a while, I catch myself. I'm like, no, you come right back. So
it's like dancing.
We're going to go ahead. We're going to get back to our text here now with
I have a question for you, Rabbi Glickman.
Please, Andy.
Would you and Rabbi, would both our rabbis perform a wedding of a Jew and a non-Jew? What's your stand on that?
The answer is yes. I can't speak to the details with Rabbi Sheffrin because that's just unfair. He should, you know, he needs to articulate that himself. But for me, the answer is yes, under certain conditions, but that can basically be summed up by this. If I deem the marriage to be good for the Jews, which is most demonstrably, you know, if they plan to have kids, that they intend to raise the kids as Jews. So if that is the case, and there's some other smaller qualifications that lead into that bigger consideration. But overall, if I deem that a couple's union will be quote unquote good for the Jews, then I'm willing to officiate and give a public blessing representing the Jewish people. If it's a marriage that I feel, you know, that they plan to have kids but not, you know, raise them Jewish, then I feel that I can't represent the Jewish people and give the blessing of the Jewish people to this union, but I will privately offer a blessing to them and wish, that God, watch over them, that they should be healthy and happy and fulfilled and loved. And I only want good things for them, but I won't publicly stand in front of people and offer the blessing unless I feel that they are adding to the strength and well-being and continuity of the Jewish people.
Will you perform a wedding with another clergyman? I
do not. That's part and parcel of the bigger thing. So no, I don't co-officiate with non-Jewish clergy and don't have any symbols or practices that are foreign to I should say, of another religion in the ceremony. So if they have a cousin who's, wants to read from Corinthians, no, they can have that, but they just won't have me there as well. They should have what they want. And if that's what they want, then it just won't include me. But if it's going to include me, then it doesn't have to be Jewish, the ceremony, but it can't have foreign elements to it. But I obviously, if they're choosing me, it means they want Jewish aspects of the wedding typically, or they have a parent who really wants it and they want to honor that parent. And so usually with me, they tend to choose to break a glass or have a chuppah or a ketubah or or a kiddush, with a kiddush cup. They usually want other Jewish components. And I find that once I'm in that position of being their rabbi, I make a pretty good case for the other Jewish components, and they tend to choose them. And that's always fine with me.
Just a side question.
Yes, and then Lynn will be next.
Have you married Jesse yet?
Jesse, Jesse, our head of maintenance, his wedding date is in October. So no, the wedding has not happened yet, but just last week we had a meeting of bride and groom, our first big meeting. We've only had like little chats. This was our first big sit down, big meeting. That was really nice. They're concerned about COVID-19 and what a wedding's going to look like and who's going to come and Do
you have the answer?
We definitely don't. The ceremony is going to be outside, so that's fine with me. I can, be 10 feet apart and outside, and then I'm fine. If their party is inside, currently, I wouldn't go, and I probably in October won't either. So we'll have to see what that, so it'll be weird to go to the ceremony and not the reception, but this is a weird time.
Is Jesse Jewish?
Jesse's not Jewish and his bride's not Jewish. So that would be an exception to my previous rule, since no one possibly could expect them to raise Jewish children. I am there as a, friend of the groom. Jesse has grown up in our temple. He started working while he was still in high school, where he was the chair lifting, assistant to Herb Dixon, who just passed away a week ago. He lived in the same apartment complex as Herb, and Herb, hired him to be an assistant. And Jesse has stayed on, now for almost 10 years or so, that Jesse has been working at Temple. And not only has he taken over for Herb, but he's grown far beyond what anything Herb had done, because not only the temple is much larger, but Jesse has also taken on other responsibilities. So he's also our chief IT technologist, and assists us with the live stream right now and a lot of our broadcasts. So he's really grown in the temple. And so I'm very honored, flattered, and thrilled to participate in his wedding. But this is like such an aside, like, he's not Jewish, he's not Jewish. It's more like a novelty that they're having a rabbi. It's only because of our personal connection over all these years, and that he doesn't have a religious connection, and nor his bride to be, that for him, his house of prayer, the place that is most meaningful to him is our temple, and the religious leader who's been most influential, I guess, in his life has been me, even though he's not Jewish. So it's just a lovely thing. We're not expecting it to lead to me doing many other marriages of non-Jews. I do about one a decade. It's not exactly taking off this business. It's.
And you'll do the bris.
All right, okay. So we're going to get back to, hold on, let me just check the chats for just a moment. Yes, all right, we're going to share our screen now. Interfaith marriage, boom. So I promised you all, there's going to be a showdown on Moses's interfaith marriage, and it's going to become an issue for God to resolve. And God does so in kind of a funny way. We're at Numbers, why don't I just read this one so I can explain what's going on. In the book of Numbers, there's a series of rebellions against Moses's authority and also against Aaron's authority. Most famously, Korah rebellion and so forth. But there's also a rebellion against Moses by his own siblings. Miriam and Aaron are like, hey, Moses, why do you have all of the attention? Why do you have all of the authority? This should be a triumvirate of Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. And they assert themselves. And in particular, they do so by raising up a scandal, and that is that Moses is intermarried. Now, here they speak of a Cushite woman. Now, the question is this Cushite woman the woman we heard about earlier at the well, Zipporah, or is this yet another marriage? As you know, the men of ancient days had multiple wives sometimes. Maybe this is another woman. It's not clear. It could be the same, or it could be two different stories of Moses's intermarriage from different traditions of different tribes that got fused. But whatever the case may be, it's referring to an interfaith marriage. and they're scandalized by it, and they make a thing of it. So we're in the book of Numbers, chapter 12. When they were in Hazarot, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman he had married. He married a Cushite woman. They said, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Has the Lord not spoken through us as well? Remember, Miriam is a prophetess. The Lord heard it. Now, Moses was a very humble man, more so than any other man on earth. Do you see what I was talking about, how the narrator sometimes puts stuff in to make you feel one side or the other? Do you see what the narrator did here? Stopped with just the dialogue or speaking the facts and gave a little background information on Moses, in that Moses is the most perfect, wonderful person who's ever lived. Not that that will bias you or anything. So look at the narrator speaks when the narrator speaks. So when the narrator doesn't speak, it's also interesting. Now Moses, the narrator says, now Moses was a very humble man, more so than any other man on earth. Suddenly the Lord called to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, come out, you three, to the tent of meeting. So they've been summoned, you know, they all have to come to the tent of meeting, which is where God gives revelation. So the three of them went out. The Lord came down in a pillar of cloud, stopped at the entrance of the tent, and called out, Aaron and Miriam. The two of them came forward, and the Lord said, hear these my words. When a prophet of the Lord arises among you, I make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is trusted throughout my household. With him I speak mouth to mouth, plainly and not in riddles, and he beholds the likeness of God. So just for a moment there, what God's saying is Moses is absolutely unique. There are other prophets, but I speak to them in dreams and visions. Only Moses receives what's called direct revelation, namely, only Moses. Howard, can you help? Somebody needs to be muted who isn't muted, and if you could help me with that, I appreciate it. Only Moses receives God's word lip to lip, face to face, the very word of God, unadulterated. Okay, I can see who it is. It was Phyllis, or no, it wasn't Phyllis. I don't know who it is.
I got it.
You got it? Okay, thanks, Howard. All right, so basically God says, how dare you speak this way against my man Moses? And let's get back to it. Here I am, let's find the cursor. He is trusted throughout my household, says God. Now I'm here at verse 8. With him I speak mouth to mouth plainly and not in riddles, and he beholds the likeness of the Lord. How then did you not shrink from speaking against my servant Moses? Still incensed with them, the Lord departed. As the cloud withdrew from the tent, there was Miriam, stricken with snow-white scales. So let's stop the share for a moment. What we have here in the showdown is they question Moses' authority, that only he speaks on behalf of God. And they say he married a Cushite woman, which is a scandal in their eyes. It's a shanda. It should either disqualify him or lower him a few pegs. And God says, he's my man. How dare you speak against him? And boom, you've got leprosy now. Goodbye. Does God defend interfaith marriage? No. In some ways, it implies that God or the narrator isn't even all that excited about interfaith marriage, but rather it doesn't matter because Moses can do whatever he wants because he's Moses, so shut up about it, is basically how I read it. It could possibly be a statement supporting Moses in his intermarriage, but it doesn't say that. It just says it's no big deal because what's a big deal is Moses. And Moses, if he's going to can break a rule because he's Moses and don't question him. Now, the rule, though, hasn't come yet. Nowhere in Genesis, Exodus, or Leviticus does it say, thou shalt not marry someone of a different faith. Let's look at that now. Unless you have some comment about the leprosy issue, in which case, or the scandal with Aaron and Miriam, one could rightly ask, why was Miriam alone punished and not Aaron? And one would rightly be unsatisfied with any answer.
I have one question, please.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the Bible, correct?
Yeah, Torah, yeah, this is the Bible that we just read from. What did we just read from? Numbers chapter 12.
Okay, and was the Bible written by whom? Interpreted by whom?
Hey, that was the question we're not addressing today. Oh. So just because it's too big, that we should do, session 7, who wrote the Bible.
Okay, make a note of that.
And what in the Bible is true. I mean, that would be its own session. I can't do that now, other than to say the Bible, especially the Bible, because now the Bible is composed of, a couple dozen books, was written by many people over many centuries. And even within some books of the Bible, you have aspects of them that can be much, much older than later aspects of that same book of the Bible. The Bible is a quilt that contains squares that some are very ancient and some were sewed in at the last minute. And the version that we have is only 2,000 years old, but almost all of it was done 2,600-700 years old, and it includes components that are 3,000 years old. So it's a very complex answer to your question, but I figured I'll at least try to answer it in a minute, and that's your 1-minute answer. Now, my friends, it's not until Deuteronomy that we get finally the mitzvah on intermarriage. Now, those of you who've studied studied Torah and its history before, know that Deuteronomy is very different than the first 4 books in terms of its origin. In terms of its structure, it fits right in, but its origin is very different than the other books of the Torah. Deuteronomy is the 5th book. It's the retelling of the first 4 books by Moses before he dies. Deuteronomy is much later. It was written a good couple hundred years later than Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. It is much more in keeping. It's part of the same textual tradition as Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, and 2 Kings. It's really part of this later book, but it is part of our Torah, the first 5 books that are of special import. And it's not until we get to Deuteronomy, later than the rest of the Torah, that we finally find the mitzvah that Jay has been waiting for. Jay, wait no longer. Here is the commandment on it. Deuteronomy 7. Actually, Cindy, you're right up on my screen. Will you mute yourself and be our next reader, Cindy?
When the Lord your God brings you to the land that you are about to enter and possess, and Lord dislodges many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations much larger than you. And the Lord your God delivers them to you, and you defeat them, you must doom them to destruction. Grant them no terms and give them no quarter. You shall not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from me to worship other gods. and the Lord's anger will blaze forth against you, and it will promptly wipe you out.
All right. So here you have the commandment. You shall not marry. When you enter the land of Canaan, there's going to be these 7 nations listed here. They're going to be bigger than you. You're going to live among them. You're not going to expel them. They're going to be around you. Or you might eventually expel them, but not right away. And don't marry them. And in particular, reason is given, which is unusual. Most of the commandments of the Torah do not give a reason for them. It just says, don't eat pig. It doesn't say why. It says, don't murder. It doesn't say why. It just says, don't do these things, and without any explanation. But here is one of the rare cases where a mitzvah of the Torah is accompanied by its own explanation. Don't marry their daughters. Why? Because they will turn your children away from me to worship other gods. So, my friends, I said we're going to focus on the Torah because ever since Deuteronomy, once we leave the time of the Bible, when we get to the time of the rabbis in the last 2,000 years, this commandment has really carried the day. The Talmud will affirm it unequivocally, that not only is interfaith marriage forbidden, it's meaningless. It's not a valid marriage. It's not recognized by our people. There was some discussion among the rabbis whether the Torah only forbids marrying these 7 people from these 7 nations, or are you forbidden to marry anyone? And the answer is forbidden to marry anyone from any nation. And the proof text is right back to this Deuteronomy passage. They said, because anyone from any other nations, not just these 7, can lead your children astray, lest they start worshiping Jesus or Muhammad and Allah or who knows what, or Buddha, or whatever they might be led astray to do by marrying a woman. You'll notice it's gendered, by marrying the daughters of other people. So the question I would like to ask you is, do you feel it's okay to marry someone outside your religion? Do non-Jewish spouses lead Jews astray? And will the Jewish people be wiped out by intermarriage? I don't think we should break again, because we're coming to the, we don't have a whole lot of time left. So I want to keep it in this bigger, because I did eavesdrop and pop into your groups and notice that you did cover some of these issues. But I want to invite people on this bigger level, if you want to share in this, do you feel that the continuity of the Jewish people is threatened by intermarriage? Have you observed people led astray, like they married someone not Jewish and started following their ways? What do you make of not only the Deuteronomy mitzvah not to marry outside of the Jewish people, but also its reasoning that it will lead them to worship other gods? I open up the floor. Please unmute yourself and chime in.
I'd say that the most positive answer is that this has been a question for years and years and years, and we're still here. So even though...
Interesting. Although I would argue that against that point, in that for thousands of years, Jews primarily did not intermarry. I mean, we were remarkably endogamous, marrying within our own community in stunning ways, in really unusually rigorous ways, which is why geneticists always want to study Ashkenazi Jews, because we have been the most restrictive in our marriage, and it makes our gene pool most interesting to them because it's not a big mix of everybody. It's a very specific gene pool that they find interesting because we have not intermarried. And there have been cases where we have in pocket communities living in outposts. And that's really terrifying for us today because the great enemy of our people is anti-Semitism. But the great partner of Jewish continuity is anti-Semitism. Because where there's no anti-Semitism, Jews tend to assimilate, intermarry, and dissolve away. And that happened in India, and it happened in China. It happened in India, I believe, around the 17th and 18th century, and it happened in China in the 18th and 19th century in Kaifeng, where Jews lived in peace and tolerance, were loved and accepted as neighbors and equals and citizens, hand in hand embraced. And the Jews lived as a separate people in India, and in China for a generation and another generation and another generation, until within a few generations, they were gone as a separate people. Their descendants remain, and genetically, they are found among the people in these Indian cities, and especially in Kaifeng in China, where there's a lot of Jewish genetics within the greater community of that Chinese city, but there are no Jews there are no self-identified Jews living a Jewish life. So that I would say speaks against Joanne. The hope you have for America, how we're different than India and China, is that there's 6 million of us here. What happened in China and Kaifeng is there were only a few hundreds or thousands of Jews in those communities. We're 6 million. That might bode differently for our future. Yeah, Pam, go ahead.
I think that, as many of you know, some of you don't know, I work for Catholic Charities, and I work in the Diocese of Venice. And if there's any influence at all, have people tried to influence me? You bet they have. But I will tell you, it's only drew me closer to Judaism. I think it depends on how strong your faith is.
Hold on, that's the exact subject for Wednesday's talk, which is why aren't we Christian? For 2,000 years, Christians have been trying to get us to be Christian. Why aren't we? We've been living in majority Christian areas for most of our existence. Pam, you hold on to that. We want to come back to that because that's the subject of Wednesday's discussion.
Can I say something?
Please.
Okay, so this is in reference to, can Jews be led astray once you are married to a non-Jew spouse?
Mm-hmm.
I counseled interfaith couples for many years. I'm of the belief that you cannot be led astray. Mm-hmm. If you go into a marriage knowing who you are, and if you really don't hold on to your beliefs, it's not that you're led astray. And this is kind of documented from all these couples that I worked with. Not that they didn't have issues, because they didn't always, as young couples, already have solved all their religious issues. But I don't think you can be led astray. You either don't care enough, or it wasn't important to you,
You weren't anchored.
or you didn't have that foundation. And one thing that I used to stress to these couples, you need to talk about this before you get married. Because if you don't, it is going to come up and up and up at every holiday, at every religious occasion. So I just don't believe you can be led. I think you either know and you're going to stay firm to your foundation and your roots, or you didn't care enough. We all know couples right now, young and old, who probably are not following their own religion in an interfaith marriage. And they just were not that focused and devoted. I don't think someone can lead you. You're either there or you're not.
But do you think, are they following the partner's religion or are they following no religion?
Well, the question was about being led astray, which led me to believe if you're Jewish and your partner is Christian and you're being swayed. I mean, you know, we all know, I personally know several young couples right now who are embarking on marriage and they're not interested in following the Judaism that was presented to them. So, you know, it's not that they're being led astray. They weren't interested. Which they go.
All right, well, both Jay and Sally Steele have their hand up, so whoever wins, you have to unmute yourself.
Let Jay go because I was just scratching my head.
But Jay, you got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, the problem to me starts with how you define who is Jewish and who isn't. For example, if I always understood that if your mother was Jewish, you were Jewish. Therefore, if a Jewish man marries a non-Jewish woman and children are born, those children are not considered Jewish. But conversely, if a Jewish woman marries a non-Jewish man and the kids are born, those kids are Jewish. So it all begins with how we define who is Jewish. And if a new definition is figured out to make that determination, it'll go a long way in solving the problem of diluting the Jewish religion, because it's how we define who is Jewish and who isn't Jewish that creates the conflict.
Well, the Reform movement already has done that by patrilineal descent. If you are the child of a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother, but you are brought up as a Jew, you're considered Jewish.
Boy, I didn't know that, so thank you.
That is correct.
Is it with the patrilineal descent? My understanding, I agree, but then you kind of have to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Absolutely. You have to be raised,
you are
demonstrably be raised Jewish, i.e. Jewish life cycle events, a bris and baby naming, bar bat mitzvah, attending religious school, Jewish camp. You have to be taking positive steps if you have a Jewish father, a non-Jewish mother, to be Jewish among the Reform movement. Ellen Klein, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something? Oh, no.
And Adrian provided my comment. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Barbie.
Yes. So if a Reformed Jew is brought up from patrilineal, but that child can't marry a conservative rabbi won't marry that child to a Jew.
That is correct. So the Reform movement, which represents about half of the Jews of America, recognizes the patrilineal descent. But that child would not be able to, marry a conservative or Orthodox Jew or qualify for right of return citizenship to Israel unless they went through a conversion process, which is really not that hard. And a few of the Jewish men of our congregation who are raising non-Jews have sought, excuse me, let me rephrase that because I misspoke. We do have a few Jewish fathers married to non-Jewish women. They're raising, their kids Jewish, and though they understand the Reform movement recognizes patrilineal descent, they seek a conversion ceremony anyway. I would say almost half the time, and we grant it fine because they want their kid to be able to, move to Israel if they want, or be recognized in conservative circles as Jewish, and that's fine. It's just it's a splash in the bay. It's a real easy ceremony, especially when the kid's already, attending, school, or if it's a baby already, having a bris or a baby naming. There's no extra. All it is a splash, which is pretty easy when you live in Florida where the water's warm year round. I want us to start wrapping things up because it's 2:50. So I'm sorry for the hands that are up. I want to go back. I want to comment on two things. I just thought what Susan Killman has said was so thoughtful, and I agree with it, but I wanted to make one nuanced exception to it. What she said is, don't blame the non-Jewish spouse for leading your Jewish kids astray. They chose that spouse. They knew their life was ahead of them. If they were adamantly wanted to be raising Jewish kids, they'd have Jewish kids. It's not, it's because they didn't care or because they liked the assimilation that they're, choosing people. People are, making, they're not being led. They're making this case. I agree with her. I agree with her absolutely with a couple caveats. So I agree that people make these choices, whether they're doing it consciously or not. But a couple things that do mitigate that. One is sometimes people don't care about religion until they have a baby, and all of a sudden they care a lot. And thank goodness for that, because we'd have no young people at our temple, because all of the religious school parents that are in our temple now, a lot of them when they're in their 20s weren't doing anything Jewish, and now they don't miss Havdalah, and they don't miss this, and they're all, they're totally, they never, they didn't do Sukkot, and now they are, like they're doing things that they didn't do in their 20s. Once you have kids, you start wanting to give your kids what you had, and it matters more for you. So some people do enter interfaith relationships and interfaith marriages out of ignorance. They think it's not important to them, and then they are sadly disappointed and go through a great hurt when a baby comes, when A, they start caring about things they didn't care before, or B, to their surprise and ultimately dismay, their spouse starts caring about things religiously that they never cared about before, and all of a sudden it creates rift and problem, and that's bad. Two, the other caveat I wanted to make is that there is one thing I feel that Deuteronomy does get right, and here I'm going to say something that is terribly gendered. I'm going to make distinction among the sexes that is, I believe, a true in generality, though it's unfair to any particular man or woman, but I'm going to say something very sexist right now. In my experience, the vast majority of the time, the religion and how religious a household is dependent on the mom. Even in households of equality, where the husbands are real good pitchers in and they really are great with the kids and they're doing dishes, you know what I'm talking about. Even then, it's the mom who's making the holiday cookies, whether they're Christmas cookies or Hanukkah cookies. It's the mom who's decorating the house for the holidays, whether it be dreidels or a Christmas tree. It's the over and over and over again, it is the woman who's bringing the religion in the home. So much so that I feel Deuteronomy was speaking the truth there, even though Deuteronomy is gendered and it's offensive. When they say the women are going to lead, your kids away to these other religions, I've seen it. The women tend to bring the religion into the household and dominate the religious life of a household. And a non-Jewish man marrying a Christian woman needs to not be surprised by that. But the truth is, most of our Jewish families, Jewish children, are not marrying Christians. They're marrying non-Jews of no religion by and large. Whether they be born Christian but not practicing, or they're born Asian and not practicing, most of our Jews tend to marry non-religionists. Of these, the non-Jews that they're marrying are not adamantly Christians by and large, though that happens.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
I'd like to just say there's another problem at times, because I know our son, when he had his two small children that were taught Shabbat age, was taking the kids, and I've shared this with you before, but somebody in the congregation in the membership group was very unkind to my daughter-in-law, and that was the end of their pursuing their direction to become and raise Jewish family, have a Jewish family.
that is terribly lamentable, and really one of the great errors of sort of the first generation of intermarriage, and one that the conservative movement has suffered from terribly, was to take a really hostile stand, not only against intermarriage, but those who are intermarried. And they drove an entire generation out of the conservative movement who warmly embraced Reform Judaism or nothing, and which is the biggest, number one biggest reason why Reform Judaism grew in the, the last 25 years, while the conservative movement has shrunk and shrunk, and why the Reform movement overtook conservative movement as the largest of the streams of Judaism in America, and significantly so now. But anyway, back to my point. The women tend to determine, and I think Deuteronomy's onto something there, and where I see it for me as a person with the greatest anxiousness is I see it in the Jewish men of intermarriage who are raising their children, Jews in our temple, without a Jewish wife, and they struggle. It is so much easier for the Jewish women in our temple who seem to be raising Jewish kids without any problem. It's really hard for the men because it's not their nature. They're not making the cookies and decorating the household or whatever the reason is. They struggle and they struggle and they struggle. And it's a constant like swimming upstream. Whereas for the Jewish women married to non-Jewish men, it's like swimming downstream for them. They have their challenges. There's rocks in that stream. There's some, but it's downstream they're going. So I feel like Deuteronomy did have some insight in its genderness. I want to end by talking about our confirmation kids. And now, because we said this is a confirmation class, I want to show you what I positioned I asked the confirmation kids, when it's time for you to find a spouse, will you only marry a Jew? Will you prefer a Jew? Will you actively seek a Jew? And I want to share with you some kids. Almost all of them are not dead set on marrying a Jew. And one of the big reasons is today's confirmation kids, a significant percentage of them, specifically the majority of them, are coming from an intermarriage. They are not afraid of intermarriage. There's no taboo of intermarriage. It's all around them. So some of them are saying they would prefer a Jew. Some are saying, whoever I fall in love with. Some are saying they will actively seek a Jew, but if they fall in love with someone who's not Jewish, that's fine. But the taboo that many in this call grew up with, that the expectation is that they will marry a Jew, is not something that today's 8th, 9th, and 10th graders are feeling. And then I have the kids during this lesson, they go through these texts much faster than you do. They're like, they don't like to talk much, so it goes pretty quick. So I present them with this challenge. Imagine a wealthy Jewish family is giving $10 million to create a video advertisement to help the continuity of the Jewish people. Which of these 3 videos would you recommend they fund? So they're going to drop $10 million to create one video that's going to help with Jewish continuity. And the kids have to decide where should they can only make one video, what should that one video be? Should it be, and it has to be one of these 3, a video encouraging young Jews to marry a Jew, or a video encouraging interfaith couples to raise their kids as Jews. And 3, encouraging children of interfaith couples to choose to be Jewish. What should be the target here if you're going to spend and have this huge campaign to make a video? Now, what we do in the class is once they pick it in their groups, once they pick it, they find other kids who want to make the same video, and then they make it. They all have smartphones to make a video. So they all make these 30-second advertising spots in groups to either encourage young Jews to marry a Jew, encourage interfaith couples to raise their kids as Jews, or encourage children in interfaith families to choose to be Jewish. Or so that was my plan. I thought the kids would divide up into these 3 groups, and we would have a variety of videos that get made. As it turns out, I was wrong. The vast majority of the kids only picked one of these 3. So we had several groups making effectively the same video, well, different videos, but based to the same target. Now, in hindsight, I should have guessed which one they would have picked. Almost all of the teenagers picked, ding, 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 number 3. That if you're going to invest in the children of interfaith marriage to encourage them to be Jewish. Now, why would they think that? Maybe because they figure that interfaith marriage is inevitable. 71% to 75% of Jews of our circle, i.e. non-Orthodox Jews in America, will marry someone not Jewish. So maybe they just assume that interfaith marriage is a given. And maybe they figure, but I think the biggest issue is teenagers are all about empowerment, and they don't think parents determine the religion, they think kids do. And so they figured they should convince their fellow kids, that they should, and we made some great little video spots on why they should be Jewish, which will lead us to Wednesday's session. Why aren't we Christian? Why, living among Christians for 2,000 years, do we remain Jews? Why haven't we converted? I mean, obviously some in our ranks did. Why do we stay Jews, even though it's hard, even though there's anti-Semitism? That's our class for next week. Friends, today's session was on interfaith marriage. I hope you'd enjoyed studying some of the Torah texts and learning about how there was interfaith marriage in ancient times, not so much for the last 2,000 years, but a whole lot of intermarriage in our world today. We didn't figure out all the answers today, but I hope you found it intriguing. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody so we can say our goodbyes. Before you go, you're welcome to, whoops, that's not what I wanted. You're welcome to stick around for the after party. If you have any further questions, you're welcome. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody now. And oh no, it doesn't work. You have to unmute yourself. So goodbye to those who are going.
Thank you,
You're welcome
Rabbi.
to stay, those who want to stay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you Wednesday.
See you
See you Wednesday at 1.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Rabbi. Are you still there,
Can
Rabbi?
I just share something with you?
Yeah, I'm going to be around for a minute. Let's just, we're losing a couple people. Let's go Bobby first and then Ross.
Okay, Rabbi, if you could touch on something in the next lesson about why aren't we Christians? I posed a question before, I am Christian, but when you were talking about Canaanites and Philistines and Egyptians, who created the non-Jews?
Noah. Esau, Noah. I mean, I don't know. They've been there from the beginning. We've always been a minority.
I consider every human being on earth to be Jewish. Whether I call myself a Christian or not, that was created by the same God.
Yeah, it's interesting. That notion is popular among some Christians that is really rejected among Jews. I mean, we consider ourselves a distinct and separate people with our own history and our own identity. And so we've resented some Christians saying, well, we're all Jews, because we're all humans, or we're all God's children, but we're not all Jews, because Jews is a particular people with a particular destiny, with a particular history, a particular covenant, and a particular present, which is part of this tribe, this clan, this greater whole that we call the Jewish people.
I have to tell you what I clarified in our meeting, something that I've told Helene a few times, to compliment you. I feel much more at home and wanted in Temple than I ever did in any church.
Oh, well, Bobby, that's because we love you.
I love the whole thing. I love everybody.
And Bobby, we were in Israel a year ago.
Right. Yeah, we were. This would have been our third day there.
Yep. This is the day, I think this is the day that you guys were on the returnee trip, right?
Right.
So this was the day you went south, because Elaine and we separated our anniversary. We had our anniversary breakfast. Right. And then I went north with the beginners and she went south with you guys. All right, Roz, you had your hand up next.
I wanted to share with you a story about a relative of mine. He was brought up in a very Orthodox community. And he married a woman who had been brought up Catholic, had a short marriage and had been divorced. And she went through an Orthodox conversion before my nephew married her. And they were married by several rabbis came from Israel, and they were married. There were several Orthodox rabbis there, and she promised to be kosher and observe Shabbat and the whole thing. But because she had been, my nephew was a Kohen, and because she had been married before, she was not a virgin, he was stripped of his Kohenhood, and you are aware of that. Okay. I was actually appalled by that.
Of course, it's appalling. But yes, but that had nothing to do with conversion or upbringing or anything. If she were Orthodox and he were Orthodox, that's not what a Cohen cannot marry a divorcee or a widow. Anyone who's been married before, a Cohen has to marry, and so. So that marriage would be forbidden unless he is no longer a Cohen.
Aren't they also not supposed to marry a convert?
It was the fact that she had been married. Is that correct?
It was the fact that she had already been married, right? And they also are not supposed to marry a convert, which is is also equally offensive.
Right.
So, Rabbi, I had talked about this in the first breakout group. Both of our kids married non-Jews, and the rabbi in the synagogue that they grew up in would not marry them.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to explain to them that he had the right to make that decision, but what he didn't do, and I wonder if this was just him or if this happens, he never acknowledged the hurt that he was causing them by not marrying them. And the day after, he would have welcomed them, both couples, into the synagogue.
Yeah.
As an interfaith couple, but he wouldn't marry them. It caused tremendous hurt. He was their rabbi, and he never acknowledged it. So how do rabbis who will not do that?
It's hard. Well, first of all, there's very few Reform rabbis now who won't do an interfaith marriage. So part of it was a specific moment in time, which is, any moments of change or upheaval come with rifts, and they come with Terran. And that happened to the Jewish people of America as we transitioned from a people that hardly ever did intermarriage to within a whole one generation later when the vast majority of Jews are intermarrying. That's a really radical change in a short period of time. And that interim period led to a lot of hard feelings and rifts, and because the position of many rabbis, Reform, and the conservative movement as a whole, though we were liberal movements living assimilated lives in suburban America and embracing, the American, fellowship and brotherhood and sisterhood, when it came to intermarriage, were taking a hard stand against. And that was their first reaction, is we have to stop this. We can't condone it because it will lead to the end of the Jewish people. And as it turns out, that was an error. It was a strategic error. It was a strategic error because you can't fight a tide that has its own movement. And that was happening, and the rabbis were unable to, and the conservative movement was unable to stop it. Instead, what they did was lost the opportunity to embrace. And your rabbi, that's the macrocosm. On the microcosm, your rabbi did all of that. In that didn't embrace, and then by not acknowledging the hurt, was saying, well, but now that you're married, you're welcome here. Well, off screen, I'm showing how your kids must have felt about the rabbi saying, I won't do your wedding, but you're welcome to come to Shabbat service. They're going to say, blank you, Rabbi.
Right.
You weren't there for me when the moment I needed you. I'm not looking to come to Shabbat service. I wanted the rabbi at my wedding. You weren't there. And not only did you spurn me, but you publicly humiliated me by making a political stand against me and my wishes and called me taboo. And that kind of hurt, the rabbis, and I've heard, the rabbis of the generation above me say, and sort of perplexed, and I've heard them anguished in our conventions when we've talked about this, like I've opened my doors and I've written bulletin articles and I've given sermons saying that you're welcome here and your Interfaith is welcome here. Well, that couple, those kids are not reading bulletin articles and they're not hearing the sermons because they're not in the synagogue. They don't go to the synagogue until they're ready to, have kids and raise and go to religious school. So they only reached out to the rabbi in this one moment, and it's the wedding. And if the rabbi has spurned them in that moment, and worse than that, not only let them down, but basically said, you're taboo, and, and embarrassed them publicly and in front of their spouse, they're trying to say, oh, we should be Jewish or raise the kids Jewish, except, they're hating on us. It was a bad moment. There are hardly any Reform rabbis now that aren't doing interfaith marriages. It's sort of a moment that's passed. Most Reform rabbis now recognize that we're not stopping anyone, and we got to do all we can to encourage Jewish choices, including Jewish officiant at the wedding.
Glad to hear that.
What's that?
Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
I feel bad for your kids. I feel bad that the rabbi also was probably a victim of his time.
And interestingly enough, fast forward many, many years, and he was no longer the rabbi, his daughter married someone who wasn't Jewish. And I don't know if he performed the ceremony. I've spoken with him a few times, but I never asked.
I didn't want to ask.
All I knew was that her husband was
Yeah.
going to convert, but
Yeah.
I don't know who actually married them. So there you have it.
So yeah, so without revealing our own political views, our daughter Eden last year comes up to us. It's at dinner. She goes, "Would you rather I marry someone who's Christian or of that political party?"
You said Chris.
Thanks. That's,
Did you answer?
we've been so nice to our daughter. I mean, all of her life, we've provided for her, we've been nice to her, and this is what she gives us.
That's
Welcome to the club.
Good sweetheart.
That's what she does. That's the thanks we get. This is how our children torture us.
It's a
Would you
fair
rather
analysis.
I marry someone of the wrong political party or someone Christian? So thank you very much. That's it. That's how they get you.
My daughter married an Asian Catholic, and one friend, and I should say that she was not a terribly well-educated person, but she wanted to know if I was more upset that he was Catholic or Asian.
Yeah. So, all right.
And he's a lovely guy, and they were going to raise the kids Jewish, but when they started going to temple, it wasn't, their kids went to sleep early, and the children's services were inconvenient. And so now they're nothing.
It's sad.
It is very sad, but it is. Well,
Look, we're finding that, the majority of children of interfaith marriage are nothing. They're not Christian, they're not Jewish. But a good number are Jewish. And so our numbers are not plummeting on account of interfaith marriage.
Good.
Our numbers are plummeting on account of indifference, but not interfaith marriage. It's interesting that it's not the interfaith marriage itself that's driving people away. It's just the apathy and indifference generally to religion that
it's not
is
just Jews,
diminishing
though,
our numbers.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Okay.
So we have to fight indifference. We have to fight indifference.
Sure. But it can be measured on a number of levels too. Commitment to Israel, is diluting terribly among the younger generations. It's measured in a lot of ways that's really independent of intermarriage. So even among Jews that are marrying other Jews, participation in the Jewish community, attachment to Israel, a lot of basic markers of a Jewishly rich life and Jewish commitment, are diminishing because of assimilation. Intermarriage is seemingly more of a symptom than a cause. So in that regard, Deuteronomy is wrong. It's not that intermarriage is the cause of our kids being led astray. It's apathy. It's assimilation is the real cause. And that's what I said, why I said that it's actually anti-Semitism is the friend of Jewish continuity.
Right.
In the most ironic sense.
Right.
When they hate us, a few of the breakout groups, people said, when they grew up, the non-Jews in their neighborhood were so horrible to them. There was such animosity and anti-Semitism, you would never think of intermarrying. You didn't have to be told not to intermarry. You would never consider it because there was such animosity.
Right.
But in an area or a time of greater fellowship, then the assimilation and intermarriage comes naturally.
That's right. And that's why like the Arabs, when the Arabs are against us, when the Arabs, we have no fear from the Arabs. When they fight with each other, they don't fight with us. When the Arabs don't go after us when they're fighting with each other. When there are problems,
I don't know exactly how that relates, but it's interesting you bring up the Arabs. In Israel, there's very little intermarriage.
See,
And in part because, you know, it's a scandal among both communities, but that's not the only reason. It's the animosity between the two groups.
Yeah,
It's
that's
the wars after war after war. And, you know, there is, you know, in many places some détente, but it's not like American Jews have a warm, you know, regard, like it's exceptional places like Haifa where, you know, Jews and, you know, and Muslim Arabs are, you know, getting along well and intermingling, or in the medical professions in the hospitals where they work side by side. But in general, there's very little intermarriage in Israel, and a lot of it has to do with a lot of animosity over the generations.
yeah. Rabbi, I want to mention one thing that's not in this topic, but thank you for the Misha Berach that you've done for me. It's made me feel much better, and it's Brenda. And I want you to know that I'm feeling much better, and you can put me on the healing list. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
You want to go off the healing list? You're feeling better?
Yeah, I'm feeling better, yes.
Oh, I'm so glad, Brenda. So you've had no episodes in the last week?
Since I left the hospital, I haven't had any episodes. And
Oh, that's wonderful.
They took me down one of my pills, and so thank you all very much for the Misha Berach.
Oh, I'm so glad, Brenda. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
and the phone call you made to me and everything, and all the well wishes, and thank you so much. So I wanted to tell you that, so you can take me off the Misha.
Thanks, Brenda. Thanks for letting me know. I'm really glad. And Lynn, before you go, thanks for your diligence. And Pam, don't forget to come on Wednesday. Wednesday's all about you, Pam.
Oh, see that, Pamela? Yeah.
They try to convert us. Why aren't we Christian?
Yeah, and we have friends here that are Messianic Jews, and my God, they're trying to convert me and David. Oh my God, they're trying so hard. Trying to even call back and apologized, and I said, it's okay, you don't have to apologize, just don't do it. Don't try to convert me. Yeah, they're Messianic Jews, and there's a thing on the internet.
Are they ever going to stop, Brenda?
No, they don't stop. They keep trying to get me.
Then you gotta cut them out. I mean, that's horribly disrespectful of who you are.
Why I noticed that they know it's no good because they call and try to apologize to me. They try to apologize to trying, so they know they're doing the wrong thing. And they said there must be a strong group here in Florida of Messianic Jews because.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there must be, because it's on the internet. There's a thing called the Ezrat Hashem, and it's a group of Messianic Jews, the Ezrat Hashem, and they have YouTube and they have this and that, and it's terrible. It's terrible.
No, they're a very evangelical, radical Christian group that's trying to make all the Jews Christian, and it's offensive.
Yeah,
Cut them out. Cut them out of your life. They're insulting you and your husband.
That's right. Hear that, David? Yeah, that's very bad. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go, guys.
Okay, bye.
Y'all. See you Wednesday at 1, if not sooner.
Yeah, right. Bye now. Thank you so much for
Bye-bye.
today. Very, very good, everybody. It was wonderful. Okay, shalom, Lizraot.